Everybody's had some adventures. Everybody's had a few close calls. Everybody's got a story. What's yours?
Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 20 of Cool Story with David J. McNeil. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate your support. This episode features a chat with Malcolm Hill. In 2016, Malcolm and his wife Anisa packed their bags and moved to Costa Rica from the Gold Coast of Australia to begin their dream jobs running their own surf school here on the Papagayo Peninsula. Today, not only do they own and operate their own surf school, Surf Papagayo, but they now have two sons, and Malcolm also hosts a popular podcast known as the Move to Costa Rica podcast. We chatted about the experience of throwing caution to the wind and moving to a new land, what running a surf school entails, and being able to share the stories of other expats with the world through podcasting. So why don't we just jump into it? Here's my conversation with Malcolm Hill. Hello, Malcolm. How you doing?
David, I'm doing great, and I'm really thankful that we get to chat today, mate.
Yeah, this is great. We're doing a podcast record this morning, and for once, I'm actually chatting with somebody over the internet who's only blocks away, as opposed to a continent away. Audio will be even better, but who knows?
Well, it doesn't necessarily mean that we have better quality internet than the other people you speak with in other places.
No, that's correct.
because we're in Costa Rica, so anything can happen.
So the reason I wanted to have you on my podcast is because not long ago, I was a guest on your podcast, and I think that episode is probably coming out soon, but you've got a podcast called Move to Costa Rica podcast that you've been working on. You're obviously not from Costa Rica. You've moved here from Australia. Tell me a bit about your experience. What was it that you were doing back in Australia, and how did you and your wife decide that you were going to leave your comfortable home and come all the way over to Costa Rica and start anew over here?
Well, we were actually somewhere in between Australia and Costa Rica, so I'll try to paint the picture the best I can. But back in 2015, we got married in Australia. I was working as a sales agent selling timeshare packages in the Gold Coast of Australia, and that's like a really big tourist hub in Australia, so it gets like a lot of tourism already. Been to the Gold Coast? Yep. So it's kind of like for those who haven't been, imagine the beachfront of Miami in Florida. Mm-hmm. With all the big high rises. That's very similar to the Gold Coast in Australia. And it has that same sort of intensity, but on a much more smaller scale of like party life and like people going there to enjoy nice weather.
Yeah.
and get rowdy as well.
And Surfers Paradise is right there as well, right?
Surfers Paradise is right there. So I was originally born in New Zealand, but moved over to the Gold Coast when I was 10 years old with my family, and my parents started working in tourism then. Fast forward 2015, we got married. My wife Anisa, she's from a town called Toowoomba, which is a few hours inland of the Gold Coast, and she was working as a school teacher, primary school teacher. You know, going through our first year of marriage, as you do, and we're renting a moldy little apartment in a really humid city with no air conditioning and sleeping on a mattress on the ground, which is good fun. And we were super happy. We were both really happy with our jobs. We were both making good money, but we knew that we wanted to go traveling and see what else was out there instead of just Australia. I'd traveled a bit already in my early 20s, went backpacking for a few years, but we'd always discussed ever since we met, like, you know, we need to go see the world. We need to get some more perspective on what life's all about. So I had always been a surfer. I'd always been really into surfing, and the Gold Coast in Australia is like a surfing hub of the world, really. You know, there's many world champions who come from the town where I grew up. So surfing was as popular as probably ice hockey is in Toronto, as an example.
Right, yeah, sure.
You know, like everybody knows what's happening in ice hockey in Toronto, even if you're not into ice hockey, probably, because it's like a cultural type of thing there. And surfing was exactly the same on the Gold Coast. Yeah. Like my parents are not surfers, and they could tell you who the world champion is right now. They could tell you like the names of many of the professional surfers because it's just very embedded in the culture. Mm-hmm. And we were offered a job, kind of what you'd call the dream job, many people would call the dream job, running a surf school or a surf operation in a hotel in the Maldives.
Right.
Which is like this little chain of islands. It's a country, but it's a chain of like 1,300 islands underneath India in the Indian Ocean, for those who have no idea what the Maldives is. And yeah, mate, that's where we went. So we took off from Australia. We had 10 days to get rid of all of our stuff and move out of our moldy little apartment. And we made it to the Maldives and started there. We were there for a year. And then the same company that we were working for actually offered us a position to do the same type of thing, but in a hotel here in Costa Rica.
Right. Well, that's a good time to move, because you do know that the Maldives is sinking.
They have said that, but it's strange. When we were there, I would talk to the local people and I'd say, hey, the news is saying that your country's going to sink and that your little island nation isn't going to exist anymore.
Yeah.
And they would say, they've been telling us that for the last 40 years and we're still here.
Right.
Whether their opinion, I don't know. Maybe that's just what I heard on the ground.
Yeah.
However, yeah, it probably is going to slowly, eventually disappear.
Yeah. Well, it's probably not an easy reality for people who've grown up there to accept. So then you end up coming over here, and where did you get set up? Was it Tamarindo?
So we came here to Costa Rica in 2016, November, and we got settled straight away in Playa Hermosa, which is right next to us here where we are in Plaza del Coco. This is the northern part of Costa Rica. It's an area that has 6 months of super dry weather and 6 months of really wet weather. And we call it dry season and wet season, pretty basic. And we started working almost straight away and were running that same business, that same surf school right until COVID happened in March this year. And that's when I actually started the podcast, the Move to Costa Rica podcast, a few months later. Part of it was out of desperation just to start talking to some people, because I'd worked in tourism for so long and would be meeting new people every day and getting to know new people. And then that was just taken away overnight. And immediately we just found ourselves like at home together with our little toddler, and my wife was pregnant. And I'm thinking, I need an excuse and something that will excite me to talk to people, even if it's digitally. Yeah. And that's what got me fired up to make the podcast. And I would say it was almost like a me giving myself a motivational talk as well, to create a podcast about people who had moved to Costa Rica and like set up their life here. I really wanted to evaluate, after being here for like 3.5 years and COVID hitting, like, what is this really where we want to stay long term? And I'm going to chat to all these other foreigners who have made a life here and see like what motivated them and what has helped them to make a life here, to create, what a lot of people would call like a dream life of living somewhere really beautiful and still having enough income to do it. And we're almost at episode, I think we've got 22 episodes recorded now. Yeah. And we're super fun. And your episode should be coming out, David, in a couple of weeks' time, mate.
Cool. I look forward to hearing it. I want to ask you more about the podcast, but I wanted to ask you a bit more, because we're talking about, moving to Costa Rica and living your dream life. Tell me a bit about, I think a lot of people think of, that the job of being a surf instructor in a place like this as being, kind of a dream job. And what would that be like? What was that like? What is it like? First of all, does the company still exist?
The opportunity that we had at the Four Seasons kind of finished for a number of reasons, which was somewhat out of our control. But no, we've set up our own business now called Surf Papagayo. It's you can type into Google Surf Papagayo and you'll see all about us. Yeah, we still run surf tours and we run them in this area, and it's pretty cool. But I'll give you an example of a day in the life of a surf instructor, because it's not all just the dream job.
Sure.
As everybody knows, no matter what job you do in life, there's going to be some parts of it that you would prefer somebody else did most of the time.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what it is. But the average day for us, our schedule was is still very determined by how busy tourism is. So here in Costa Rica, it's very easy to know when that's going to be, because it's the time when Americans have holidays, or North Americans have the ability to travel. So that's going to be Thanksgiving, it's going to be Christmas and New Year's, you've got spring break, Easter break, and the June, July school holidays. Yeah. And those are kind of your windows each year when we would do probably 70 or 80% of the activity that our business did was in those periods of time. And then in between that, we might have a week where there's only, one transaction, one lesson. And then the next week we might, if it's a busy time of the year, we might have 45 people doing lessons a day for 7 days on end.
Wow.
So really, really busy with multiple instructors. But that would consist of me during a busy week being up by 4:30 every day, being down at the beach by 5:30 with all the equipment ready, ready to get on a boat and take a 30-minute boat ride over to where the office is. No, more like a 15-minute boat ride over to where the office is. Prepare everything ready for the trip, be ready a minimum of 20 minutes before the departure to meet the guests who would be coming on the surfing tour. Meet the guests, make sure they do all their paperwork correctly, make sure all the safety stuff is figured out, guide them down to the boat, spend 40 minutes with them heading out to where the surf break is, take them through a safety discussion before they get in the water. So and then I can keep going, but then surfing with them, making sure they're catching enough waves, making sure they're safe, making sure they're not drowning. And these are all, when you're working when you're working with the ocean is unpredictable. Anybody who's spent any time around the ocean, they know that. And that means that safety is just like super important, and things go wrong with surfing. Yeah. Things do go wrong. You've got sharp fins, you've got hard surfboards, and
you got people who don't know what they're doing.
You got people who don't know what they're doing. And that's the reason they're paying us money to take them out, because they don't know what they're doing. If they knew what they were doing, they wouldn't be paying a surf instructor or a surf guide to help them make the experience better, typically. Mm-hmm. So there would be times where we would have 3 or 4 weeks on end where I'd be getting up that early, and I'd be out of the house until 6 or 7 p.m. at night when the sun goes down. The nice thing about being a surf instructor and being in the ocean, even though it's a dream job, you can only work during the daylight hours. Yeah. There's no way you can do anything at night. So that's something I always like. But it's like anything else. If it's going to be done properly, it's hard work, and we love it, and I still love it, because the reward of helping someone actually experience surfing on a level that's better than they were expecting is a nice feeling to be able to help with that.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers your question, David.
No, that very much so. No, that's, it sounds like what you're describing is, it sounds like I'm a diver. It sounds like a day of diving, with all the different steps you've got to go through before you can go out and dive, and a day of diving can be exhausting, just carrying all your gear around and getting ready and coming in and out of a boat and all that kind of stuff. It takes a certain amount of energy to do all that stuff, lugging things around and in and out of boats and all that kind of, and being out in the sun for that long too.
Yeah, the sun, mate. And for a skinny little white guy like me, the sun is just brutal. It's taxing, yeah. So I'm usually very covered in sun cream and hats and long sleeve rash guards, and I go to the nth degree to try to protect my skin, because I know that it's if something happened to me from a skin perspective, it would be the end of me being out in the sun. But to say it's the dream job, like, it totally is, because I love being out in the ocean, and it's what I want to be. That's what I like to do, whether it's work related or not. And so it's definitely the dream job, but it does come with, it's a physical job. And before, when I was working in Australia, I only ever did sales related jobs. So I was never expending, physical energy at work. But for this stage of my life, it's something I like. I'm 31, and I feel like I'm only going to be able to be this intensely active for so many years. And why not? Why not now, Yeah,
for sure. And you must run the gamut of the type of people who come out. You must get a lot of kids, but you also must get a lot of middle-aged people who kind of, this has been on their bucket list and they want to learn how to surf, right? You must get a lot of those guys like me.
We do. I mean, guys like you who want to learn to surf, you're all right, because you'll listen to me and you'll listen to my instruction. The guys that are really challenging are the guys who surfed for maybe 1 or 2 years in college, but it's 30 years later now, and their dream of how their body physically works and how it actually works now are very different.
Yeah.
So we get them out in the ocean, and I tell them, in an average surf session, you might be paddling 3 or 4 kilometers. Like, it's a lot. Yeah. Like just paddling, because after each wave you have to paddle, back through the breaking waves before you can catch another one, right? And that's physical, especially if your body is not used to swimming or not used to being used in that way. So we always find it really interesting, and it's sometimes a little bit heartbreaking when I see guys who surfed when they were younger. They come out again as someone a bit older, and that's the time when it's really disappointing, because they see like, oh man, my body's just not where it was.
Yeah. And then you paddle all the way out there, and then I guess probably the hardest part of surfing is just that first is getting up on the board at first, that hop up from lying completely on your stomach onto your feet, right?
Well, it's like doing a burpee, and a burpee isn't super easy. And especially if you're going to catch 20 waves again, that's like 20 burpees you're going to be putting in that day, just getting to your feet.
Yeah.
But at the same time, people love surfing because it's physical, but it's one of those sports where you don't think about the physical aspect of it when you're doing it, because it's so engaging.
Right.
You're in the ocean and things are moving around. And mate, I didn't think I'd be talking about surfing so much today, David.
Well, that's what people want to hear about when they say got a dream job. Well, what does that involve? What does your day look like?
No, it's good fun, and it's the older I get, the more I realize surfing where I grew up, it wasn't unique, right? Every one of my friends was a surfer, most of them much better than me at surfing. I briefly tried to be competitive in surfing when I was younger in Australia, and I just wasn't up to the standard.
Mm-hmm.
And, I became an adult thinking, I was a pretty mediocre surfer. And I'm not saying I'm a great surfer now or that I've improved drastically, but now living in a place where there's not a huge surf culture and I am able to help people have those experiences, tourists have those experiences, it's really cool. And it's not a part of surfing I ever realized I'd be into until I started becoming a surfing instructor. But yeah, you think about like riding a piece of foam on top of a moving piece of water in the ocean, and that moving piece of water came from a big windy storm thousands of miles away. When you explain it that way, it seems totally ridiculous, right? It seems like the strangest thing ever, and it is. When you think about it in those terms, it is. Like, human beings have not been riding waves in the ocean for very long. Yeah. We've done a lot of other stuff, but surfing's a pretty recent thing. And yeah, I very rarely see anybody who doesn't enjoy it once they've had a good experience with it.
Yeah. I'd be curious to try it. I've got good balance. I've got a bunch of longboards. I ride longboard skateboards.
Nice.
I brought one of them down. I've got most of them are back in Toronto, but I zip around Toronto on my longboard, and it's fun to go out at night too when all the traffic's gone downtown and the streets are kind of empty and stuff. And so I've got pretty good balance. So I'm hoping to see at some point whether or not I can actually get up on a board and whether or not that balance is helpful to me on a surfboard as well. I know it's different, but I figure
it's different, but it is helpful. Anybody who's had experience like standing on a board that's moving at any speed, whether it's on land or in the ocean, can help massively, because you're then not estranged from the feeling of like standing on a moving board.
Yeah.
Because that for a lot of people can just be, that can trip them out right from the beginning. Like, you're on this thing that's moving.
Foreign thing for most people, for sure.
For sure.
So you're running this business and things are going well, and then all of a sudden, like everybody else, your business gets undercut by this pandemic, and then you launch the podcast. Is that something you had ever thought about, or what, or was it sort of a thing of desperation? You're like, well, how do we sort of keep our our business forefront and keep our names out there and keep moving? What was the thought?
That's a great question. I'll tell you a little bit of where my thinking was in March. So we had just, as you said, everything in March, everything had shut down. And it was right in the middle of what was going to be the busiest time of the year with the business, because it was right in the middle of spring break. And we had just organized additional staff for the business. So we had, 3 or 4 additional surf guides ready to meet the demand. And some of them had come from, other countries to help us out during that time. So as the borders were closed into these other countries, it was it was trippy. So from the beginning of March to the end, I just remember, and we found out that my wife was pregnant with our second baby that same month.
Yeah.
It was just a wild ride of emotions. But as we were starting to evaluate everything, I thought, okay, a few things I really need to learn are digital marketing. That's going to be really important from here on out in in the world.
Yeah.
So I need to start learning about that. And I started speaking to a few friends who have businesses here who suggested they needed help with those sort of things, and started working with them on their specific projects. And part of that was learning about podcasts, because podcasts are becoming this medium where people are able to be doing something else and listening to something in their ears, which is super cool. And that's not that's also a recent phenomenon for people, right? Like, I can be exercising in the morning listening to your podcast, like I was this morning, the last episode with Giselle. Really great episode. For those listening, you should go back and listen to that. And I thought, I need to learn about how this stuff works, because at some point it's going to have value for me. And I didn't want to like waste the time that I had out of the ocean. Yeah. I knew that tourism was going to be done for a while, and it's just starting to pick up now in kind of December, December 2020. So I jumped on YouTube and started looking at video tutorials. I wish I could say it was like more intelligent than that, but that was really where I began, and started realizing like, okay, doing a podcast would be a good challenge for me, and it would help me meet a lot of people, and it would help me improve my language skills and improve, how I speak to people, which is, I think, really valuable. And first, I actually had an idea with a friend. We were going to make a podcast about being dads.
Yeah.
And we recorded one episode, and then both of our wives were like, nah, you don't have time for that. You guys don't have time to do that. And then I thought, kind of after speaking to a few friends, like, Costa Rica is just an amazing place. It's a place where my wife and I have had such a great experience, like living and enjoying this stage of our life. And there's a whole lot of other expats here who moved here for similar type of reasons. Wouldn't it be cool to get some of their stories on record? Like, these are people who are going to be in this country, living here nearby us for as long as they're here. And it would be really smart of me to get to know some of those people and learn about what makes them tick and what's got them through living here, and what are the things they love, what are the things they don't like, and try to take as much of that into what my wife and I do, and learn from it. So that's where it started. And my wife keeps saying, hey, but how's this gonna, like, is this gonna make any money? And I'm like, I have no idea, but it's good fun at the moment. And even 21, 22 episodes in, that's how many were recorded, I feel as though every episode I learn more stuff, and I listen to things I've said and I think, what a moron, like, why'd you say that way? And why did you cut that person off? And why didn't you ask that question better? And having that mirror back on myself, for me, is something I really value. And I like it.
Yeah, it's good to work on all of your tools that you'll need beyond the podcast. I think too. I mean, what'll be interesting to see is once travel is back, is to see sort of who starts showing up for surf lessons that found out about you through the podcast, or was intrigued to come down through the podcast, and how that manifests itself. That'll be interesting to see on the other side of this.
Yeah, I think we've actually had quite a bit of inquiry for our surf business with the internet recently, and I can't say how that directly relates to the podcast, but for the podcast, I had to build a website, and I had to learn, about how to record a podcast, and how to edit a podcast, and how to upload a podcast and get it onto Apple Podcasts, and all these different things. And learning all of that at the same time as applying some of those lessons to the surf business, that's a different website and a different marketing game. It's interesting now seeing there's results coming from some of that in the form of inquiry, which when you start learning those things, you think, I'll follow what people say, but maybe it won't work. And then when it does start working, it's really exciting.
So now that you've been doing the podcast for a while, and you've talked to a lot of people who've moved to Costa Rica, have you discovered any sort of universal truths or anything you were surprised by? Or what are the things that jump out at you about the people you've met who have moved here and why they've moved here?
That is a great question. That is a really good question, David. And I have noticed some things. One recurring theme, it's not with everyone, but it is with a lot of people, is that the person who lives here now, the adult who lives here now, often moved around a lot as a kid, or at least moved from one geographic location to another geographic location when they were a kid.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's just a complete coincidence, or whether those people now find it easier to relocate because it was something they did when they were a child. I found that aspect quite interesting. The other commonality between people wanting to move to Costa Rica is they want to have a less rapid life. They want to live a more peaceful, slow, smell the roses, be with nature type of life.
Mm-hmm.
And without exception, everyone I've spoken to has felt that.
Right.
They felt that wherever they're from or wherever they were from was living life at a speed that was too fast for them.
Mm-hmm.
And they look at Costa Rica and they go, in Costa Rica, I can set my own pace.
Yeah.
And I would say, yeah, that's a really common thing. And what else is common?
Well, I remember hearing one of my neighbors was on your show, and I caught a snippet of his on that you posted on your Instagram. A guy named Brian, who
back
in California was a lawyer and ran a
jiu-jitsu gym.
Jiu-jitsu gym, yeah, and you just used a tidbit of him talking about being on the 405 in LA and just like how cutthroat it was and how nasty traffic was, and he kind of said that's kind of how society was, or how he felt it was, that everybody was fighting for the same little piece, and that it just got tiresome.
I totally agree. I try to be really careful with the podcast because we don't want to crap on everywhere else, It's not like the purpose of setting up the podcast is to try to say like, where you live in the West, it sucks. And here we are in Costa Rica and it's amazing and we're all having the best lives. That's totally wouldn't be the way to look at it. And I've found that everybody who has lived here long term and spent time here, life's problems don't disappear because you move from one country to another.
Yes.
A new set of problems arise and a new set of challenges arise. And those challenges are the language barrier for many people.
Yeah.
When they move to a different country, just getting things done in a system that's different to the system you're used to back home. Like if you're from Canada, like me from Australia, man, our government systems, they're pretty efficient.
Yeah.
Like they work and they have deadlines and like the deadlines are met and like those things, they just work. And then when you come to a place where that might not necessarily be the same way, it's an adjustment of perspective.
Yeah.
And I enjoy those challenges because every one of them makes me think about life a little bit differently. Whereas I'm not sure what's another way that I can explain this, and I'll try to make it make sense, is that when a human being is in an environment that they know really well, that they've been their whole life, it's easier to get distracted because you don't have to be as alert. And I find that living here in Costa Rica, I have to be alert every day because there's random things that are going to happen that I just don't expect. And having to pay attention to that is a style of like living that I really enjoy. I like having to have these moments every day, or not every day, but a lot of the time that just blow my mind, that are just totally not what I expected.
Yeah, what are you talking about specifically? Are you talking about like nature or run-ins with animals or what?
Oh, okay. Here's an example. The other day, where we live in a little neighborhood with not one family, but there's a family that has kind of founded this neighborhood. We're still in a very small town here in Playa del Coco, like 6,000 or 7,000 people maybe in the wider area. So this one family, Los Canales family, and they maybe have been here for 5 or 6 generations. And now, it's gone from a couple coming to their kids, to their kids, to their kids. So we live next to this family where now there's 13 brothers and sisters living within, like 13 brothers and sisters who are in their 50s with the next generation and the next generation all living in this one area.
Right.
And they have cows in the middle where they have like a paddock. So an example of things that happen that I don't expect to happen is the other day I walked over to visit the farmyard animals with my son because he loves doing that and pointing at the pig and seeing the chickens and seeing the cows. And as I'm over there, a bunch of the kids from the community, they say, hey, we are looking for shrimps in the stream, like that's running past here, like the little river. Do you want to come and see how we catch the shrimp? And it's these 8 little kids in bare feet. I didn't even know there was shrimp in that little like to me, it's like a bit of a dirty river.
Yeah.
And then I run over there with all these barefoot kids, and they're showing me where they're getting these things. And I just think, my kid wouldn't be having these experiences where I grew up in Australia.
Right.
Just simply, he wouldn't be. And for me, that's great. That's great. And I really am keen on my kids just having that wide range of perspective, because of course we're going to take them to Australia and we're going to hopefully be able to travel with them to many different parts of the world, but having an upbringing here where they're really involved with nature and a lot of other community kids, and it's a safe area and it's peaceful and they can go outside all the time, that means a lot to us.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we noticed in our neighborhood. There's a lot of little kids who live specifically. There's a little condo community next door to us where it's all 3 bedrooms. It's the only one in town, I think, condo building that's got three unit
there's
houses.
not many that have 3 bedrooms.
Yeah, so there's a lot of kids that live there, and I always get a kick out of watching them because they seem to be living the way I did when I was their age. I was born in 1970, so I grew up in the sort of the late 70s and the 80s. And we just, we got home from school and you threw your school bag in the back door, yelled at your parents that you were leaving, and then you'd run off and play sports or hide and seek and do whatever with your friends for hours until you had to come back for dinner. And then you'd probably go out and do that again until the street lights came on. And, we didn't really spend a lot of time in front of the computer. We had video games and stuff, but we just didn't spend a lot of our time doing that. We just ran. We were just always exercising. And the kids around here do that. There's a kid who comes by and walks our dog a couple of times a week because he came over and asked if he wanted to make money. So we said, sure. There's 2 of them. One of the kids, I've never seen him wear a shirt. You know what I mean? Like they're just tanned and running around and playing all day long, when they're not at school. And just when I'm back at home in Toronto, you don't see kids doing that because these kids don't live that way in North America anymore. Everything's much more structured. They're being driven around to things and to hockey games and baseball games and soccer or whatever, or tutoring or whatever they're doing. They're not running around like we did when we were kids. So it's kind of neat to see that, because I guess it's because of the community here. It's just, you can still live that way here, which is interesting. I don't know if that's part of your experience with your kids as well.
Definitely my experience, mate. And sometimes I don't know whether it's that I'm afraid of the passing of time and I really want my kids to have that style of upbringing, because I'm sure many people in the West would think, well, it's just unreasonable for you to expect your kids to be sheltered from all of that electronic stuff. But, there's still that option to have them grow up like that here at the moment. And then me and my wife are really happy we get to take advantage of it.
Yeah.
It's like, why wouldn't we, It's kind of on the same topic, but the lack of development here in certain aspects is something that I think it takes a lot of foreigners to get used to. For example, we live on a dirt road, and to get to the dirt road we live on is another dirt road. And every time it rains, there's huge potholes and parts of the road wash away and people's houses get flooded. And part of me thinks, wouldn't it be great if we could pave this road?
Mm-hmm.
Like, wouldn't that just be a great solution? But then I think, well, if we pave the road, the value of all these properties goes up. Mm-hmm. If the value of all these properties goes up, a lot of the families who live in them will probably consider selling them, right? And then, we have a whole different neighborhood dynamic.
Yeah.
And part of living in Costa Rica, I think, which this definitely gets said on the podcast, but it's accepting that a lack of development in certain ways is a positive. Because if there's things about the status quo that you like, they may be able to last a little bit longer if there's a little less progress.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know what point I'm trying to make there, David.
No, it's like it is back home. I mean, if you I remember living in this neighborhood for so many years and loving it, and then all of a sudden, on the main street in your neighborhood in Toronto, there's a Starbucks that goes in, and that means that the prices are about to go up, or it did back in the day. Some of those companies, I think, McDonald's is just as much a real estate company as it is a French fry company. And when, but when you see that Starbucks come in, it's the beginning of the end. It's like your community is now going to be a quaint, a very expensive community. And a lot of people end up moving out of there because that's what happens everywhere. It's like if you that's the one thing I like about this town too, but the only thing in town that's a big sort of American chain right now is Subway.
Yeah.
That's the only place you can eat at in town that's sort of an American fast food place. I wouldn't want McDonald's here or Burger King. It's fine that they've got, one of those over in Liberia, but I think people come to Coco because they want the real kind of experience, and you can still get that here.
You can.
You get all of the new, but you also get, you can also see people riding horses around town, or, once in a while, or you can drive by people's homes and they've got their family horse tied to the pole in front of their house, and their chickens walking around on the highway in front of their house. And,
for example, I saw a dog attack and kill a chicken this morning out my kitchen window, like that's just stuff you see here.
Yeah, for sure.
Or monkeys.
A lot more circle of life stuff.
You do. And being connected to that, I think, throughout history, most of the time, humans, we were really close to nature. Mm-hmm. We had like a pretty strong involvement with it, or at least, we were outside most days and seeing what was happening. Nowadays, a lot of times in big cities, people can go days without seeing much greenery or hear any birds, or feel without feeling very connected to nature. And I never thought I'd be one of those people who said, "Oh, it's great to be connected to nature," because I'm just not that type of guy. But here, when we take time to go hang out on a beach or go for a walk or whatever, you always feel great. You always feel really good after that. Yeah. And the fact that we can do it really 365 days of the year, because the temperature is conducive to that, it allows you to develop like a really good routine of getting outdoors.
Yeah. The other thing one of the things I notice is that I'll take our dog Ruby out for a late night walk, and so I'll take her out some nights, and then I'll be walking her, and I'll stop in the middle of the street, and I'll look up at the stars, and I'm like, wow, it's amazing how many stars you can see, because of course, where you grew up, where I grew up, there's just so much light pollution that you don't see the stars the way you do down here, or the moon. So I'll stop and look up and check out the stars for a minute, and then I can hear the Pacific Ocean beating up on the beach, just 300 meters away. And I stop and take a deep breath and just kind of look around, and I catch myself at those moments every once in a while. Where you're like, oh, this is pretty nice. It's pretty special. It's a good place to be.
Sorry if we sound like jerks talking about how good it is here, guys. We just we really do enjoy life here. Like, especially foreigners who come here, they come here with the idea of enjoying all of those things, and for the most part, they do. Like, foreigners get out and about, and they really. There's a lot of foreigners who enjoy this country just as much, if not more, than the locals, because they love it so much.
Yeah, well, but having said that, I get those feelings when I'm back home too, about Toronto as well. There's a lot of things that I pinch myself every once in a while where we live in Toronto, and think, wow, what an amazing place, and all the opportunities we have. It's just sort of shifting gears and being in a place where you go from being in a big city to being in a place like this, where you can appreciate the differences as well.
David, what do you think of seeing the same faces all the time around town?
It's interesting. I feel like it's interesting because I remember I met a guy I was out in Nova Scotia, Canada, years ago, and I was joking around with them, and I said, you guys, whenever you tell stories, it's like we start with, Bob, who lives next door. Okay, Bob's sister, well, she works over at the hardware store with Jim, and blah, 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 blah. And then you get big, and then it's like, well, that guy got a truck. And I kid around with these guys, it was a big, long sort of story about how everybody knows each other. I said, in Toronto, you say, hey, do you know the guy who lives next door? No. You often don't even know the person who lives next door to you in a big city. Here, when I go down to the corner store to pick something up, on the way there, 10 people say hi to me, including little kids who ride by on their bikes and give me high five. Do you know what I mean? Who live in our neighborhood. So it's different. And we also noticed, like I said to Belinda when we moved here, I said, for the first time, we've actually not that we're reckless, but you have to be careful with the relationships we have with people, because it's such a small community. Just for instance, we were having a chat with somebody about, how do you decide to, when you have a get together, it's not COVID times, but you organize something, and who do you invite? And if somebody posts pictures of it on Facebook, and other people, are going, oh, I didn't get invited to that. I don't experience that back in Toronto, because it's a very different lifestyle, and there isn't that small community feel,
There's definitely that here, man. I can fully relate to that. And it's crazy, because any decision you make here, that's a relational decision, whether it's friends or business or friends or business. Yeah, those are kind of the two categories, but you essentially have to evaluate it from a lot of different levels, because you have to sometimes consider, what's that person's relationship with this other person who I have a relationship with, and is that gonna be the right path forward? Because when you live in a small place and everybody does know everyone, you really have to look for a harmonious win-win decision most of the time whenever there are things that come up like that.
Sure, especially if you plan on being here for a while.
Especially if you plan on being here for a while, because you're going to be seeing these people. So you have to really work to be on good terms. You don't have to work. I mean, most people are on good terms with most people, but it's not like in a city where you see someone once and you never ever see them again. Here you see them, and if they live in this town, you're going to see them again and again and again. There's only a couple of roads here.
Yeah. No, in Toronto, you could work with somebody, and if you ran into them on the weekend, you're like, wow, I can't believe I ran into you out of the blue. And you know what I mean? Because it's such a big city. Here, just all day long, you're running into people, and even the people you don't know sometimes recognize you, like the people who work down on the main street or helping to park cars or doing whatever nefarious business they're into. You drive by and they realize know who you are. One day we were out with our French bulldog driving around in a golf cart, and some guy yelled, "Hey, I like your dog." And then every time since then, like it was the only time we took our dog out in the golf cart, whenever he sees us around, he yells out, "Where's your dog?"
And that's his thing with
that's
you.
That's his thing. Yeah. And we don't even know who it is. We just, there's that guy again. Yeah. Yeah.
In your community here in Las Palmas, because I'm sitting pretty nearby you. So as you would know, there is a gentleman who is an alcoholic. There's no other way to say it. And he hangs around the little group of shops just in this community.
Yeah.
And he has probably been here for 4 or 5 years. I asked a taxi driver about it today. And if you live here, you see him every day because that's where he hangs out. And he will, sometimes pass out there, sometimes have loud outbursts verbally. And everybody just accepts that he is there. That is his territory, and people help him out and people make sure he's fed. He's not looking for a huge amount of help. Yeah. He's in that sort of situation. But for example, with him, every time that he sees me, every single time he says, "You look like President Kennedy." And every single time he's like, "You look like President Kennedy." And it's been the same thing for 4 years. He's said that to me. And in a big city, or where I used to live, I don't think there was any alcoholic homeless guy who would have remembered my face, But here, there's not that many faces for him to remember.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. You also have to get him at the right moment.
You do. Yeah. So as we're talking about that, it's just good to remember that we're not in a country where we're not in a perfect country. There's people here who suffer with addiction. There's people here who have challenging lives. There's people here who don't have homes. There's people here who do go to bed hungry. It's not perfect by any means. However, the general overall vibe is pretty positive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which is good.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I get from my conversations with people who've settled down here. And the one thing that you always hear, and this isn't poo-pooing on this place, but it's just something that people need to think about before they do make a move to a place like this, is whether or not some people refer to, this type of personality as being sort of A-type personality, but it's whether or not you can move to a place like this and you can accept all those changes that you're not living in Toronto, you're not living, in Sydney, and all those conveniences. A lot of those conveniences that you have aren't there anymore. And can you do all right with that? Can you wait for services to take a while? Can you, I think that's the big thing, because then some people move down here and realize they can't do that. They can't. They want to slow down, but they can't slow down, or they need all that stimulus, and then they just get frustrated. So those are the only people I don't see it working for.
For those living in North America, I don't get anything delivered on Amazon because we don't get Amazon deliveries here. It's hard. You don't have many places to go buy things. However, as you say, David, that's the major thing to overcome, because once you've overcome the fact that you just can't get everything at your fingertips, if you can get past that and like things not panning out exactly the way you want, you can really live a pretty chill life here. And a friend of mine, he's a Spanish gentleman. He's lived here for 20 years and he runs a local tour company, and awesome guy, one of my good mates. His words are that Costa Rica lets you be whatever you want to be. Mm-hmm. Nobody is trying to put you in a box here if you're a foreigner. They just look at you and they go, oh, yep, you do you, and you have a good time doing it. Mm-hmm. And the only times I've really seen foreigners get into trouble, like you said, is when their A-type personality sometimes wants things to happen quicker than they do.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah.
That's the big hurdle to get over for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some people do it easier than others. It's been fairly seamless for us in that regard. What's interesting about it is that when that's the reality, you can't just drive to the mall and get, find everything you could possibly want, let's say, in one place. So you end up talking to people and finding out who's the person that can do this. And you get people, like you get a long list of phone numbers, your WhatsApp numbers, people who do different WhatsApp things, right? And then you got, who's the best locksmith around, and who's the best air conditioning person around, and who can get cushions made for our new furniture, or who can do this, who can do that. You really do spend a lot of time talking to people and finding out who the right person to go to is for everything, whether it's, getting vehicles to pick up friends at airports, or who's the best tour operator for sloth tours, or kids, and people are coming around. You got to know who all the players are and who the good people are, and find out who maybe those people are that are just kind of running scams, or, because there's that too.
Here's a good example of that. A good example of that yesterday was, for the last 2-3 weeks, the car key that we have, which is an electronic car key. We only have one, and it's been faltering, right? And we've got one of those push start cars. So you get in, you put your foot on the brake, and the little light turns green and you press start. So essentially that hasn't been working. And I've been thinking, man, where would I get a battery for a car key in Costa Rica? Yeah. So I messaged the local locksmith, because the local locksmith has helped us before with normal keys, and he says, look, I don't do that, but here's a number of someone else. So he messages me the number of another guy. I contact that guy and he says, let me have a look at it. So I drive around to where he is, and he's only 5 minutes away because we're in a small place, and he rips the key open, and then he says, I can't actually do this, but what you can do is you can just go to the electronics store, and they should have the battery, and it should only cost $2.50, and you just put it in like this, and then your key's fixed. So I go to the electronics store, and 5 minutes later my key's fixed, and it costs less than $3. And to me back home, that would have been, go take the car to the mechanic, pay the mechanic a few $100s to fix the key, or whatever it would be in Australia. But those are the things you've got to do here as a foreigner. You have to just submit to the fact that, like, that's how you're going to get through your tasks, is by talking to people and getting the answers, often more than jumping on Google or Facebook or any search engine and finding it that way.
Yeah, you talk to the people around you who've lived here for a while, and they tell you who the go-to person is for this and that. And, there was a while there where we had somebody who was delivering us fresh organic veggies one day of the week. And then, we've got somebody else, who's stopped by once in a while to sell us sausages that they made. There's all kinds of different people who supply different things that you'll need that you can find here. And you find your network, you put your network together. And that's kind of what it's like to live in a place like this. Yeah. It's different.
Right, mate. It's different. It's different. But as you've seen with your time here now, as you're here longer, you just fall into it more and more. And you just, you have more and more experiences, and you become more and more comfortable with how things pan out. It really teaches you almost a level of like flexibility with life, because you realize, like, many of the plans that you make, they either don't come off, or they don't come off in the time frame that you expect. And that's great. Those are great. Those are things I definitely needed to learn. I still need to learn them over and over again. Yeah. Costa Rica is a great place to learn that.
Yeah. And congratulations again. So you've just, you and your wife have had your second child. You've got 2 sons now. What's the future look like for you guys here in Costa Rica once the pandemic is kind of, subsided or becomes a smaller issue? What are you hoping to do with the family? Continue with the business and do what you're doing?
Great question. Another great question, David. So yeah, we've got one son, our oldest son. His name's Maverick. He's going to be 2 years old in March. So he's 20 something months old, and we're just potty training him at the moment. And within 30 minutes this morning, he did 2 wheeze in his undies, and then he pooed out on the deck. And that's just the reality of parenting with him at the moment. And then we have a 1 month old. He just turned 1 month yesterday. His name's Denzel. And home life is pretty crazy at the moment. There's a lot of time I just feel half asleep even during the day, but it's good fun. Moving towards the future, I guess our plan is to continue to live here. That is above all else probably the plan, but we've already kind of accepted the fact that living in Costa Rica long term, especially when you come here like we came here when we were 26, you got to be flexible and do a lot of different things. And that's what COVID has definitely shown us. Like, we can't rely on just having one type of business or one thing. So at the moment, we have our surf tour company that we are just kind of getting going again now, but we've got the website for that, Surf Papagayo, and we plan to continue with that. But there will come a day where I don't want to be in the ocean all day, every day, and I don't want to be getting up at 4:30 in the morning. That day hasn't come yet, but it'll come at some point. Then we've got the podcast. So we plan on keeping to build that. That doesn't make any money at the moment. The surf company does. And then, strangely enough, I started a TikTok account a few months ago, and all the videos I make on this TikTok account are all in Spanish, and they're all kind of positive videos about Costa Rica, but in Spanish. And that has grown like rapidly to the point where there's 115,000 followers now or something like that.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, like 8 million video views a month. It's ludicrous. And from that, there's a few other projects I'm working on that will hopefully create other options for us. But it sounds like I probably don't have a whole lot of clarity. I guess the biggest clarity, the biggest thing we really want in our future is to continue to have the flexibility to spend lots of time with our kids. Like, that for me and my wife is like massive. And just the fact that like we can more or less run our own schedule, that's really valuable to us. And living in Costa Rica, we love it here, and we want to create a life here and want the country to do better. You know, that's part of the reason I wanted to start the podcast, is I thought if this attracts more foreigners to come to this country and invest their efforts in helping this place progress, that's great for me, it's great for my family, and it's great for the people around me. Yeah. And as life continues here, I'm sure different things are going to pop up, and in 5 years' time, everything I just mentioned might not even exist anymore. We'll see. But for now, those are the things that are firing us up, and it's exciting. Yeah, it's exciting living here, because I feel like next year's probably going to have just as many wild twists and turns as 2020 has. Right. And the next year, just as many wild twists and turns as the next. So it's exciting. But one of the things that I continually tell my wife about the podcast is the fact that every person I interview, I am really lucky to have an hour or so to talk to and get to know in a one-on-one discussion, just like we're having today. And if you have a 1 hour one-on-one discussion with someone, you could probably talk to that person at any other point in their lifetime again and have a pretty good conversation, because you kind of work each other out a little bit, you know. You're like, okay, this is how that guy operates, this is how I operate. And for me, just the ability to have like a huge list of people one day who I could give a phone call to at any point in time to say, hey mate, I don't know what I need to know about this particular thing. Do you mind if we have a chat about it? Yeah. For me, like, the value of just those connections and obviously helping other people, helping build the profile of other people as well. You know, that's good too. Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully when things get back to normal and people start traveling, if you come down to Costa Rica and you want to learn how to get up on a surfboard with the help of a man who looks like John F. Kennedy, then you call Malcolm Hill and you talk to him, you look him up. So where's the best place for people to get more information about your surf school? So if you type Surf Papagayo into Google, you'll find will probably be the first result. Or if you just type Malcolm Hill Surfer into Google, I think I probably own that title on Google, because there's not that many Malcolm Hills who surf. Yeah. And that's about it. That'll probably lead you to anything we've got online.
Yeah, excellent. And where can people listen to your podcast?
So you can listen to our podcast on Apple Podcast or Spotify or any of the major podcast apps. If you, again, just type in Move to Costa Rica podcast, if you type that in on Google, that'll take you straight to the link where you can subscribe to the show and hear the episodes. And David, your episode, I can't remember exactly which one it's going to be, but I think it's within the next month or so.
Okay, cool. I look forward to that.
So you'll be able to check that out. And yeah, we're going to have the episodes on YouTube pretty soon. So people can watch the video version with some photos and some subtitles. And a lot of Costa Ricans who follow me on TikTok have actually been requesting that we have the podcast on YouTube so that they can learn English by listening to the stories of foreigners who have moved to their country.
Yeah. Now, is that so? Do you know what the appeal is then of your TikTok videos? Is that it? Is it just the language thing and seeing this guy from Australia doing stuff in Spanish, and what is it?
You know, it's a lot of that. It's a lot of the fact that an Australian in general for a Costa Rican sounds like an alien. It sounds like something from a far off planet, right? Because Australia is so far away. There's not many Australians here in Costa Rica. And then because I speak Spanish, and my Spanish is pretty good now, and the accent that I have when I speak Spanish is like a Costa Rican, more or less, with a lot of the same vernacular and a lot of the same vocabulary. So for a small country like this that has only 5 million people and they don't have a huge expat community here, maybe there might be, say, 100,000 Caucasian foreigners in this country. Yeah. To have one who, you know, speaks in their vernacular and says positive things about Costa Rica and about the country and about our experience here, that really excites like Costa Ricans. It really excites them and I keep thinking to myself, would this same kind of, because it's almost like a social experiment, right? I make these videos, there's 500 or so videos now of these, they're just 15 to 20 seconds about whatever. I just make it up each day, but it's usually positive stuff about Costa Rica. Yeah. And the same experiment just wouldn't work in Australian culture. Like I try to think, what would happen if you had a Costa Rican guy go to Australia and learn English and speak with an Australian accent? Nobody would find that interesting. Like it just wouldn't be funny, right? Yeah. And I think it's because English is so widespread and spoken in so many different places that it's not interesting to an English speaker when they hear somebody else speaking English with a strange accent. Whereas for a Spanish speaker, for them, it's a big deal that an Australian would take the time to learn to speak the way that they speak. Yeah. That's the only way I can say it, I think.
No, you're right. I mean, I see that in general too, that it's a respect thing, and and people, the locals here, ticas, they love to see people come here from other countries who make the effort to pick up their language and to embrace the culture. And because it is very easy to move here and just act like you do in North America or Australia or whatever, and try to live that life, you know, as close to as possible. It's not impossible to do that, you know, because you see a lot of people that come down here and they don't learn how to speak Spanish. But
no, they don't.
But I think it's disrespectful a bit to the local people that you don't at least pick up enough to get by, you know. And
it's a bit of a loss, you know, because they say that the language you speak determines in a lot of ways the way you think. Like thinking and language, like actual thought processing, they are linked to the point where I saw a study where in Spanish, the word for bridge is like a bridge you drive over is el puente. And in German, now I don't speak German, but in German, the word for bridge is a feminine word. And throughout the history of Germany, whenever anybody has been talking about a bridge or painting a bridge, you can see that they paint a more feminine, loving, beautiful looking bridge, right? And in Spanish history, you can see when anybody's talking about a bridge, they're much more likely to talk about a bridge as being sturdy and solid, and that's just because of the, you know, the gender of the word in that particular language. So for me, being able to like learn Spanish here has just been because I really want to understand what's going on in people's head here. And I feel like the only way I can really figure that out is if I can understand them when they're saying it the way they say it. And the people who never learn any Spanish, they just miss out on that, which is a bummer. It's just like you're missing out on like all of this richness of culture that you could be experiencing.
Yeah, it's also very healthy to be able to speak more than one language. I mean, it's great exercise for the brain, right? To change gears and to think differently. It's also, I've talked to other guests about this too. It's the same thing with being a musical and learning how to write and interpret music. It's another, you're using another aspect of your brain. I remember my dad used to he used to help write policy and work with the Alzheimer's Association. And he was saying that they had studies that show that people who spoke multiple languages were often less likely to suffer from Alzheimer's. Just that mental exercise of switching back and forth from language to language or spoken language to musical language or whatever is good for your brain. So there's another thing you can add to your list of reasons why living in Costa Rica is a good thing.
It's a good thing.
Changing languages.
Oh, epic, mate.
So the plan is to do more of what you've been doing and to continue to explore the culture here and have your kids learn more and just kind of do what you plan to do here, do what you've been doing.
Absolutely. And make a life like we would back in Australia. If we were back in Australia, I'd be looking at either starting a business now or cracking down with a career or doing multiple things. I'm sure I would. And those same opportunities are here. However, a lot of those opportunities here have less people competing for them as well, because the market, or just the way the whole country works here, it's less efficient than the West, right? It's less efficient than Australia. It's less efficient than Canada. And I think to myself, like, here, if we can bring some of the perspective that we gain from having grown up in Australia and apply that to life here, and hopefully set up some businesses that can be successful in this economy, then that's a challenge I'm up for, and that's something that excites me, because, why do it in Australia if I could do it in a country where their language is my second language and it's way more complicated and there's all these different challenges that are going to come up? Like, awesome. Yeah. That's going to be fun.
Yeah. Well, look, I want to thank you for joining me on the podcast today. And I'm going to have to come out at some point and go surfing with you.
Yeah, mate, we will have to do it.
And maybe once it'll be fun once people start coming down to visit again more so, and things open up. It'll be interesting to see how many more people you get showing up to surf with you because of all your other endeavors that you've jumped onto during the pandemic. I'm sure it's all going to pay off. So I wish you all the best.
It's exciting times. David, Thank you so much just for having me on the show today. It's the first time I've ever been a guest on any podcast.
Oh, yeah? That's interesting. So I'm sure it won't be the last.
Yeah, it's funny having to tell some of my story, mate. It's the other way around.
Yeah, excellent. Well, it's been great to have you on today, Malcolm. I really appreciate it. Continued success to you, and all the best to your family. And I'm really happy for you that you've just had your second son. That's very exciting. So enjoy life, and we'll see each other around the neighborhood here. See you around Coco.
Epic, brother.
All right, cheers. Take care. There you have it, my conversation with Mr. Malcolm Hill. A big thanks to Malcolm for sharing his cool story. Also, thanks again to Mr. Jerry Stamp, who wrote and performed the Cool Story theme song and all other jingles and stings that appear on the show. Do yourselves a favor and look for Jerry's music wherever you stream. And finally, thank you for listening. Until next time, pura vida.
Everybody's had some adventures. Everybody's had a few close calls. Everybody's got a story. What's yours?